name is Daniel Mercer. I am 34 years old, and I was born and raised in a small mining town in Nevada that has clung stubbornly to survival long after the veins of silver and gold ran dry. My father worked in the pits when he was young, and my grandfather before him, though by the time I was old enough to ask questions, the shafts had been sealed, the equipment auctioned, and the town had turned into little more than a stopover for tourists chasing ghost stories. I never planned on staying here forever. I went away for college, earned a degree, tried to build a life elsewhere, but somehow I drifted back. Maybe it was gravity, maybe guilt. My mother passed, my father's health declined, and the house was still standing. I found work where I could, odd jobs mostly, and spent evenings wandering the edges of town where the desert pressed close and the mountains threw long shadows. Out there, you can feel how thin the line is between past and present. Abandoned shacks tilt in the dust, rusted rail tracks vanish into sagebrush, and if you know where to look, the mouths of mines gape black in the rock. Everyone here grows up with rules drilled into them. Don't go near the shafts, don't break the seals, don't disturb what's been shut away. On faded metal signs, bolted crook to fence posts or leaning against cairns of rock, the warning is simpler and harsher. Stia woyu. But people are people. Teenagers dare each other, drifters poke around, urban explorers show up with cameras and flashlights. Every year or two, someone gets lost or hurt, and the sheriff gives the same wary speech to the local paper. And still the mines sit there waiting. I used to obey the rule without question. Even when friends teased me in high school, even when I followed them as far as the fences and watched them crawl under, I never crossed. Something about the dark holes in the mountain stirred a dread I couldn't shake. It wasn't just the fear of collapse or bad air. It felt older, heavier, like standing at the edge of a cliff while something inside you whispers to jump. That dread might have kept me safe forever, if not for what happened this spring. It started with a letter. I was at the house one afternoon sorting through bills when I found the envelope wedged beneath the stack. No return address, only my name written in uneven block letters across the front. Inside was a single sheet of paper, yellowed and brittle, with handwriting so shaky I could barely make out the words. Daniel, if you still live near the mountains, there is something you must see. The mine off Cutter's Pass was never closed right. They put boards over it, but the boards won't hold. If you hear the wind, don't follow it. If you see the light, don't trust it. But if you go, remember you must not stay past the third chamber. A friend, I read it 3 times, my chest tightening with each pass. Cutter's Pass was a narrow trail a few miles north, a place I'd driven by countless times but never hiked. There were dozens of abandoned shafts up there, though I couldn't remember anyone mentioning one that was only boarded up. Most had been filled or sealed with concrete decades ago. The phrasing was strange. If you hear the wind, don't follow it. If you see the light, don't trust it. It sounded like a riddle, or the kind of orules list you see on creepy message boards online. Yet the warning about the third chamber was specific. Someone wanted me to find this place, but also to hold back. I almost threw the letter away. But that night, lying awake with the desert wind rattling against the siding, I kept picturing the sealed boards, flimsy and splintering, hiding a blackness that hadn't been touched in years. I thought about my grandfather, who never spoke of his mining days except to mutter, "There are places the earth once shut." By morning, I'd made up my mind. I told myself I was just going to look, just to see if the shaft really existed, to satisfy my curiosity, and then leave it alone. I set out with a flashlight, a bottle of water, and my old hiking boots. I didn't tell my father. He still dozed in the recliner when I slipped out. The sky was pale blue, the air already heating with the promise of desert noon. Cutter's Pass was quiet when I parked the truck at the trailhead. The path wound upward through shale and low junipers, the kind of switchback climb that leaves you short of breath, even if you've done it before. I had the place to myself, no other hikers, no distant hum of ATVs, only the sound of my boots crunching rock and the faint hiss of wind. I almost missed the mine. Halfway up where the trail curved along a bluff, I noticed a break in the rock face, a dark cleft partially hidden by scrub. I pushed closer, and there it was, boards nailed crudely across an opening, edges weathered gray. Rusted wire wrapped the slats, but several strands had snapped, leaving gaps wide enough to peer through. Cold air seeped out, not the natural coolness of shade, but a damp, almost metallic breath that brushed my skin. The sign nearby had fallen, its paint faded, but I could still read the letters stamped in red STAOUT. I should have turned back. Every instinct in me screamed it, but the letter in my pocket felt like a weight pulling me forward. I pulled my gloves on, pried at the wire, and after some effort, one of the boards cracked loose. The opening yawned before me. Inside was darkness so thick it looked solid. I clicked on my flashlight, its beam cutting a narrow path, and ducked under the remaining boards. My boots crunched onto old timbers laid across the ground, remnants of the support flooring. The air smelled of wet stone and something else, like iron left to rust. I told myself I would only walk a little way, just far enough to see if there really were chambers. The tunnel sloped gently downward. Wooden beams lined the walls at intervals, most sagging but still upright. My light swept over rusted nails, graffiti carved into the wood, initials and dates that blurred together. The deeper I went, the more the world above felt distant, muffled. My own breath grew loud, echoing. Then came the first chamber. It opened abruptly, a round space carved by pickaxes long ago. The ceiling arched high, and broken carts sat rusting in the corners. Old lantern hooks jutted from the walls. In the center, a pile of stone rubble looked freshly shifted, as if someone had dug through recently. I stood listening. The silence pressed heavy, but underneath it I swore I heard something faint, a soft movement of air, like a sigh. My mind leapt to the letter. If you hear the wind, don't follow it. I clenched the flashlight tighter and stepped back into the tunnel. The second chamber came after another stretch of sloping passage. This one was smaller, more irregular, with walls glistening damp. A single rail track ended there, the rusted steel disappearing into the stone where the tunnel collapsed. I swept my light across the floor and froze. Footprints. They weren't old scuffs coated in dust. They were clear, sharp, pressed into the dirt, as if someone had walked through recently. And they didn't lead back toward the entrance. They went deeper, toward the far wall where a narrow fissure cracked open, just wide enough to squeeze through. I hesitated. Whoever left those prints might still be down here. Or maybe it was just another explorer who had come and gone. Yet the letter had said don't stay past the third chamber. And here I was, already closer than I'd meant to be. I should have turned around. Instead, I ducked through the fissure. The rock scraped my shoulders, and for a few moments the beam of my flashlight bounced wildly off stone as I shuffled sideways. Then the space opened, and I stepped into the third chamber. It was nothing like the others. The walls curved smoothly, almost as if the stone had melted and hardened again. Veins of quartz glimmered faintly, catching the light. At the center of the floor was a hole, perfectly circular, descending straight down into blackness. Cold air rose from it, carrying that same metallic tang. The footprints circled the hole once and then vanished. I edged closer, shining my beam into the depths. The light fell, but the shaft seemed bottomless. The air rising out carried a faint whispering sound, like many voices overlapping just below hearing. I staggered back, heart pounding. My legs wanted to bolt, but my gaze caught on something scratched into the rock near the hole. Words, scrawled with frantic strokes. Don't listen. The letters' warnings crashed in my head. Don't follow the wind. Don't trust the light. Don't stay past the third chamber. I stumbled toward the fissure, desperate to get out, when the beam of my flashlight flickered. It sputtered once, twice, and died. Darkness swallowed me whole. I slapped the flashlight, twisted the cap, but nothing worked. My breathing turned ragged. Then, out of the black, a glow bloomed. It was faint at first, a bluish shimmer rising from the hole at the chamber's center. It pulsed gently, as though alive, and with it came the whispering. Clearer now, curling into words I almost understood. My skin crawled. I remembered the letter, "If you see the light, don't trust it." But the glow tugged at me, soft and insistent, like the tide pulling at a swimmer. My feet shifted before I could stop them. That was when I heard the voice. Not a whisper now, but sharp and close, right by my ear. "Daniel." I spun, but there was no one there. Only darkness and the slow pulse of blue from the pit. Panic surged. I forced myself through the fissure, scraping my arms raw, and staggered back into the second chamber. The darkness felt thicker now, pressing against me. I ran blind until the beam of daylight ahead finally pierced the tunnel. When I burst out into the sun, I collapsed against the rocks, gulping the dry desert air like a drowning man. My hands shook so badly I dropped the flashlight. For a long time I just sat there, staring back at the dark slit in the mountain. The boards leaned useless, the broken wire swaying gently in the breeze. Nothing marked what lay inside. No one would believe what I'd seen. I told myself I would never go back. That whatever called my name down there could stay in the dark forever. But the letter still sits on my nightstand. And every night since, when the wind rattles the house, I swear I hear my name carried with it. I tried to convince myself it had been a trick of nerves. Darkness plays on the mind, echoes twist into words, and when you want to hear your name, you'll find it in any sound. That's what I repeated to myself for the next 2 days, moving through the house like nothing had changed. But something had. The letter on my nightstand felt heavier each morning, as though the paper itself absorbed weight. At night, the desert wind that usually rattled harmlessly against the siding now carried a cadence I couldn't ignore. Sometimes it was only a drawn-out sigh, other times a pattern like syllables. I left the radio on to drown it out, but when I woke near dawn the static seemed to shape itself around a single word: Daniel. On the third night, I dreamed of the hole in the third chamber. In the dream, the glow rose higher, swelling like a tide. From its depths, pale hands reached upward, clawing the air, their fingers impossibly long. I woke gasping, nails dug into my palms. The rational part of me whispered, "You went in once. You saw too much. Don't tempt it again." But the other part, the part that couldn't stop replaying the feel of that cold air, the whispering chorus, the voice, kept asking questions. Who sent the letter? Why warn me about the third chamber but not about the light? And if the hole was so dangerous, why had someone gone far enough to carve Dode, lost on into the stone? By the fourth day, I was carrying the flashlight everywhere, even in daylight. My father noticed. "You look like you're waiting for something," he said from his recliner, his thin face pale under the lamplight. "Just restless," I told him. He studied me for a long moment. "Your grandfather used to look that way, right before he'd vanish for hours up near the ridges," he said. The mines called to him. I froze. Khaled. My father nodded slowly. He never explained what he meant, just that the mountains weren't quiet. "You'll do well not to listen if they start calling you." That night I decided I couldn't ignore it. Not anymore. I packed carefully this time. 2 flashlights, extra batteries, chalk to mark the walls, and my old camping lantern. I told myself I wasn't going deeper. I only wanted to document what I'd seen, maybe take photos to prove it wasn't just a dream. The thought steadied me. Evidence has weight. Evidence can anchor you to the real. The hike up Cutter's Pass felt different. The sun was lower, the air cooler, and every gust of wind seemed to carry grit that stung my eyes. When I reached the boarded shaft, I half expected the entrance to be sealed again, the boards replaced. But no, the slats hung exactly as I'd left them, wire dangling loose. I ducked inside. The first chamber was unchanged, rubble piled in the center. I paused long enough to scrawl an arrow on the wall with chalk before pressing onward. The second chamber still bore the footprints, though some edges had blurred. My throat tightened. Whoever made them had been there more than once. The fissure yawned ahead, black and narrow. My lantern swung against my leg, its flame casting jittery shadows. I told myself I would only look into the third chamber again, just long enough to confirm what I'd seen, and then leave. The space swallowed me as I stepped through. The hole still gaped at the center, rim smooth as though polished. The air rising from it was colder than before, carrying that metallic tang stronger now, sharp enough to sting the back of my throat. I forced myself closer, shining both flashlights down. The beams vanished into depth, devoured. No bottom revealed itself. No glow stirred. Relief flickered. Maybe the light had only been a trick of a dying battery. Maybe the whispers were the blood rushing in my ears. Then I noticed the markings. Not just the frantic daunt, Lusten carved near the rim, but dozens more, etched into the walls surrounding the chamber. Some shallow and shaky, others deep and deliberate. Symbols I didn't recognize. Circles crossed with jagged lines, spirals that turned inward until they vanished, and words scrawled in languages I couldn't place. I traced one with my glove, the groove rough under my finger. Who had made these? Miners decades ago, or others who came after, drawn the same way I had been. The air shifted. It wasn't a gust, more like the breath of the earth itself. Cold swept across the chamber, carrying with it a susurrus of voices. My lantern flame guttered violently. I clamped my hands over my ears. The whispering wormed past anyway. Daniel, come down. The voices overlapped, male and female, old and young, coaxing. A shiver climbed my spine. I stumbled backward, but the ground felt less stable, as though the stone tilted toward the hole. I dropped one flashlight. It clattered, rolled, and vanished over the rim. Silence followed. Then a distant clink, like metal striking stone far below. And after that, faint, unmistakable laughter. I bolted. The fissure tore at my jacket as I forced through. My chalk marks blurred in the light as I raced along the tunnel. When I burst into the first chamber, I froze. Someone stood at the far wall. For a heartbeat, I thought it was another explorer, maybe a hiker who had followed me in. But the figure didn't move. It stood with its back turned, tall and thin, head tilted slightly as though listening to something in the stone. "Hey!" My voice cracked. The figure didn't turn. Lantern light reached just enough to catch the edges. Clothes gray with dust, hair matted, limbs wrong in proportion. The arms hung too long, fingers grazing the floor. Then it began to turn. Not in a natural swivel, but in a slow, deliberate twist, the body rotating without the legs moving. Its head pivoted last, face pale and eyeless, mouth curved in a smile too wide. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping the lantern. The smile never shifted, but the jaw opened, wider and wider, until the skin split at the corners. From its throat came the same chorus of whispers I'd heard in the chamber, layered and endless. I didn't stay to see more. I sprinted through the tunnel, lantern banging against my thigh, breath tearing my chest. The entrance light grew until at last I burst into daylight, collapsing on the rocky slope. The shaft behind me stayed silent. The boards leaned unmoved. But when I staggered back down Cutter's Pass, legs trembling, I knew one truth. The rule wasn't just to keep people safe from collapse. It was to keep something inside. That night, I locked every door in the house and shoved a chair under the bedroom knob. My father noticed but said nothing. He only watched me with tired eyes, as though he'd known this would happen. Sleep didn't come. When I finally drifted, I dreamed of the figure again. Its arms dragging along stone, its mouth unhinged as it whispered my name. I woke to find dirt on the floor by the bed. Fine gray dust, like what coats the timbers deep in the mine. My boots stood by the door untouched. The next day I tried to tell myself I'd carried it in on my clothes. That explanation held until I came home from town to find new dust across the kitchen tiles in a trail leading to the back door. And when I opened that door, the wind outside whispered Daniel. I don't remember shutting it. I only remember sinking to the floor, shaking, clutching the letter. I can't throw it away. I can't stop hearing them. And worst of all, every night, the urge grows stronger, not just to go back, but to go down. I told myself I would not return. That vow lasted barely 2 days. The whispers never stopped. They slipped through the wind, through the walls of the house, even through the static of the old radio. At first I tried to drown them with noise, then with drink, then with exhaustion. None worked. The voices followed me into sleep, into waking, curling around my name like a lover's breath. Worse were the signs in the house. Dust where no dust should be. Footprints faint across the hallway carpet. Once, when I opened the bathroom mirror cabinet, I found a smear of wet stone across the glass, as though someone had pressed their cheek there and smiled. I stopped sleeping in my room. The chair jammed against the doorknob felt like a joke now. Instead, I dozed fitfully in the recliner beside my father, who hardly stirred anymore. His body grew thinner each day, his breath shallower, though his eyes stayed sharp. One evening, as the sun bled red over the ridges, he said without looking at me, "It has you, doesn't it?" I froze.
What? The mine?
His voice rasped. "The mountain, same way it had your grandfather. You went in, and now it won't let go." I swallowed hard. What did he do? My father's eyes shifted toward me, pale and knowing. He went back, again and again, till one night he never came home. We told the sheriff he wandered off drunk. Truth is, I think he listened too close. The air thickened. Listen to what? My father's gaze returned to the window. You already know. That night the whispering grew clearer, layered yet distinct. Beneath the voices, I caught a rhythm, like words rising from a crowd. Over and over they called, "Come down. Come down." By morning I had stopped pretending. If I didn't return, I would rot above ground anyway, eaten hollow by the pool. Better to face what waited in the dark. I packed more carefully. Rope coiled tight, carabiners, fresh lantern fuel, backup flashlights, chalk water. At the last moment, I slipped my father's old revolver into the pack. He never asked why. He only watched me with the look of a man who'd already buried the outcome. The climb up Cutter's Pass felt like walking into a sentence already written. Clouds bruised the sky, wind pressing sharp against my back, as though urging me onward. The boards hung as before, useless guardians. I ducked under and lit the lantern. The first chamber greeted me with silence. Rubble sat unmoved, shadows deep in the corners. But as I turned toward the tunnel, I noticed something new carved into the nearest timber. Fresh gouges, the wood pale where the knife had bitten. By skay. My stomach nodded. Someone, or something, expected me. The second chamber was colder than before, air damp and metallic. The fissure loomed at the far wall. I squeezed through, shoulders scraping stone, and stepped into the third chamber. The hole yawned at its center, black as memory. Around the rim, More symbols had appeared, scratched recent, lines still sharp, spirals intersected, words etched in jagged hand W.E. White. The whispering began almost at once. My lantern flame shivered, bending toward the pit. The voices woved together urgent, insistent. Daniel, Daniel, come down. I forced my breathing steady, dropped the coil of rope, and clipped it to a jag of rock near the fissure. Every nerve screamed against it, but my hands moved anyway, tying knots, checking the harness. My grandfather had taught me rope work when I was a boy. Maybe some part of me always knew this lesson would be used here. Lantern in one hand, revolver at my hip, I lowered myself over the rim. The descent swallowed light quickly. The shaft walls were unnaturally smooth, as if something had melted the rock long ago. Cold air pressed against me, whispering louder with each yard. My chalk marked the stone at intervals, though the rope itself was my only lifeline. Down I went, 20 feet, 40. My lantern's glow fell short, at 60. I thought I saw movement below, shadows twisting just out of range. At last my boots struck ground. The space at the bottom opened into a cavern vast and silent. The roof arched so high I could not see it. The walls gleamed faintly, veins of quartz glowing with the same bluish shimmer I'd glimpsed before. The floor was wrong. It wasn't stone alone. It shifted underfoot, gritty yet pliant, as though layers of dust and ash covered something softer. When I crouched, lantern close, I realized with a jolt that the pale flecks were not quartz at all. They were bones, tiny bones. Piles of them, scattered like sand. I straightened fast, heart hammering. The whispers pressed close, circling. From the far side of the cavern, figures began to emerge. At first they looked like miners. Helmets dented, lamps long dark, clothes ragged with age. But as they drew nearer, their shapes stretched wrong. Arms too long, legs bent, crooked. Faces smeared blank except for mouths that split into endless smiles. The lantern flame wavered. My grip tightened on the revolver. They moved without sound, gliding across the bone-strewn floor. When they stopped a few feet away, the whispering rose in perfect unison. A tide of voices layered into one command: stay. I shook my head violently. No. The nearest figure tilted its head, smile widening until the jaw cracked. A low moan rose from its throat, echoing around the cavern. Others joined, weaving into the chorus until the air itself vibrated. Stay with us. Listen. I raised the revolver, hands trembling. Stay back. The lantern flame nearly died. Cold enveloped me, sinking into bone. Images hammered my skull. My grandfather walking willingly into the dark. My father staring hollow at the ridges, the mine boards sagging like broken teeth. The figures leaned closer. Their mouths moved in perfect rhythm. Though the words struck straight inside my head, we are the silence beneath. We are the hunger. You are ours. I pulled the trigger. The blast tore through the cavern, deafening. The nearest figure collapsed into dust and ash, scattering like smoke. For one breath I thought it might work. Then the rest surged forward. I ran, lantern swinging wildly. Revolver hot in my hand, I sprinted across the cavern toward where the wall dipped into another tunnel. Bones crunched underfoot. The whispering rose into a howl. The tunnel narrowed, jagged stone scraping my shoulders. I fired twice more without looking back. The echoes thundered, but the voices never faltered. At last the passage spat me into another chamber, smaller, low, ceilinged, walls slick with damp. My lantern flickered, nearly out of fuel. I pressed against the rock, gasping, revolver shaking in my grip. The whispering dimmed. For a moment I thought I had lost them. Then a new sound drifted through the tunnel behind me. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, dragging. I staggered forward, deeper into the chamber, lantern light sliding over the walls. More markings scarred the stone, carved with fury. Doen. Telustin. Leisten. The footsteps grew louder. I spun. In the tunnel mouth stood a single figure, taller than the rest, shoulders brushing the ceiling. Its head bent crooked, face pale and eyeless, mouth stretched into a rictus grin. In its hand it held my dropped flashlight, beam flicking across the walls. It raised the light toward me like an offering. "Daniel," it whispered, not with many voices, but with one. A voice I knew, my grandfather's. The lantern slipped in my grip. "Come home," the voice crooned. "It's been waiting for you." I staggered back, revolver raised, though my arms felt like lead. The figure stepped forward, dragging the flashlight across the floor. Behind it, shadows red like smoke. The walls pressed close. My lungs seized. And then, faint, almost lost, I heard another voice. My father's. Weak, raspy, carried through memory. "You'll do well not to listen." The spell cracked. I hurled the lantern at the figure. Glass shattered, flame erupting. The creature recoiled, shrieking in a chorus of voices. Fire leapt across the damp walls, smoke filling the chamber. I turned and ran. Through the tunnel, back across the cavern, bones crunching, whispers shrieking. I scrambled to the rope, fumbling knots with shaking hands, and clawed my way upward. The figures surged below, mouths open in endless smiles, but none climbed. They only raised their arms, reaching, whispering, until the cavern shrank into darkness. At last my hands caught the rim. I hauled myself into the third chamber, lungs burning. The rope swung wildly behind me. The fissure loomed ahead. I stumbled through, scraping stone, sprinted past the second chamber, past the rubble in the first, until daylight finally seared my eyes. I collapsed outside, coughing smoke, skin frozen despite the sun. Behind me, the shaft lay silent. The boards leaned as before, wire dangling loose. No sign of fire, no smell of smoke. Only the desert wind whispering through sagebrush. But I knew what I had seen, and I knew the mine wasn't done with me. I didn't go home right away. My legs carried me down Cutter's Pass, but when the truck came into view, I froze. The mine loomed behind me, silent, patient. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that, if I turned the key and drove off, I would find something waiting in my house. So I sat in the cab until the sun went down, trembling hands locked around the wheel, eyes on the trailhead. When the sky darkened and the wind rose, I finally started the engine and drove into town. The house was dark. My father slept in his recliner, his chest rising shallow. For a moment I thought about shaking him awake, telling him everything. The cavern, the figures, the voice that wore my grandfather's tongue. But what good would it do? He already knew enough, maybe too much. I washed my hands 3 times, but the smell of smoke and stone clung stubbornly. Dust streaked my clothes, grit under my nails. When I collapsed on the couch, I left the lamp burning. Sleep came in broken waves. At some point in the night, I woke to the sound of footsteps across the kitchen tile. Slow, deliberate, dragging. I didn't move. My pulse hammered so loudly I thought it might shake the walls. The steps drew closer, reached the living room doorway, then stopped. The lamp buzzed faintly. Shadows clung heavy at the edges of the room. I forced my eyes toward the doorway. Nothing stood there. Only the empty hall, dark and still. But on the floor, faint and gray, were footprints. Long, narrow, pressed into the dust. I didn't sleep again. By morning, my father's health had worsened. He sat with his eyes half shut, lips whispering words I couldn't catch. When I leaned closer, I realized he was repeating the same phrase over and over. "Don't listen, don't listen, don't listen." I gripped his frail hand. "I went down there," I admitted softly. "I saw them. I saw him." For the first time in days, his gaze sharpened. "You shouldn't have." "I know, but they're here now. They followed me out." He shook his head weakly. "They were always here. The mind just shows them to you." His words sank like lead. "Always here." That night, the dream returned. I stood in the cavern again, bones shifting under my boots. The figures circled, whispering in unison, but one stepped forward. The tall one, mouth split wide. My grandfather's voice rolled out of the dark jaw. Stay. Stay with us. It's easier down here. No pain, no hunger, only silence. When I woke, tears slicked my face. For a brief, dangerous moment, I wanted to believe him. The days blurred. I stopped going to town, stopped answering calls. My world shrank to the house, the road to Cutter's Pass, and the weight of the voices. Every time the wind rose, I heard them clearer. They called not just from the mine, but from cracks in the sidewalk, from drains, from the hollow spaces in walls. And the footprints kept appearing across the hall, at the base of the stairs. Once, right beside my bed when I woke at dawn. Always thin, always dusted gray. On the 5th night after the descent, I found my father sitting upright, eyes wide. His voice rasped from a throat dry as stone. "They'll want you back," he whispered. "They never let go." "Then how do I stop it?" My voice cracked. His gaze lingered on me, pity and fear mingled. "You don't. You can only choose when." Before I could press him, his eyes fluttered shut, and his breathing slipped shallow again. I sat beside him until morning. The pressure built until I couldn't bear it. I told myself I'd go back once more, not to stay, but to end it. Maybe I could burn what waited inside, collapse the shaft, sever the connection. The thought gave me focus, though I'm not sure if it was resolve or madness. I gathered supplies, fuel cans, matches, rope. The revolver stayed at my side. When I reached Cutter's Pass, the sky churned low and gray, clouds swallowing the ridges. The air smelled sharp, metallic. The shaft weighted, boards leaning, wire swaying. Inside, the tunnels welcomed me like old lungs drawing breath. My chalk marks still clung to the stone. The first chamber was silent. The second reeked of damp earth. The fissure yawned. I squeezed through, lantern swinging, and stepped into the third chamber. The hole breathed cold. The markings had multiplied again, carved in fresh gouges across the stone. One phrase repeated in jagged hand, "Stay Deutsch US." I dropped the rope, secured the anchor, and began the descent. The whispers rose at once, layered and relentless. "Daniel, Daniel, Daniel." My boots struck bone again. The cavern spread vast and waiting. Shadows shifted at the edges, mouths grinning. I unslung the fuel can, sloshed it across the floor. The reek of gasoline cut through the cold. I emptied another near the walls, splashing the symbols, the bones, the rock. The whispering surged into a howl. Figures pressed closer, their smiles straining wide. No fire here, no flame, only silence. I struck a match. For a moment the cavern flared gold. Fire leapt across bones, smoke rising sharp. Figures shrieked in chorus, voices splintering into static. The quartz veins glowed brighter, the walls trembling. But the flames didn't spread. They burned only where the fuel splashed, thin and weak. The bones blackened, cracked, but the shadows remained unshaken. The tall figure stepped forward through the smoke. My grandfather's voice rolled like thunder. "You can't burn silence. You can't kill hunger. You can only join it." The match burned to my fingers. I dropped it, clutching the revolver. "Then I'll kill you." I fired. The bullet tore through its chest, scattering dust and smoke. But the figure did not fall. Its smile widened, splitting ear to ear. "You already belong." Behind it, the other figures raised their arms. From their mouths, the whispering swelled into a roar. "Sty! Sty!" The floor trembled. Bones shifted, rolling like waves. The cavern pulsed with blue light, veins glowing brighter until the whole chamber seemed alive. I staggered backward, firing blindly. Dust filled the air, choking, blinding. My rope swung above, the only lifeline. I turned and ran, boots slipping across shifting bones. The cavern howled behind me, the voices chasing into my skull. I scrambled up the rope, lungs burning, arms screaming. when I dragged myself over the rim into the third chamber. The pit glowed like an open wound. Whispers surged upward, pressing against my skull. I tore through the fissure, stumbled past the second chamber, then the first, until daylight seared my eyes. Outside, the sky was split by storm clouds, wind shrieking through the pass. The earth beneath my boots shuddered. Behind me, a deep groan rolled from the mine, as though the mountain itself was breathing. I stumbled to the truck, slammed the door, and sat shaking. My ears still rang with whispers. The shaft hadn't burned. The fire hadn't worked. And worst of all, I knew the cavern would never forget me now. At night, as I sat in the silent house, my father stirred. His voice rasped weak but clear. "You went back." I couldn't answer. His eyes opened, bright with fever. "You hear them still?" "Yes," I whispered. "Everywhere." He nodded, almost sadly. "Then it's too late." "Too late for what?" His breath rattled. "Too late to come back up." I gripped his hand. "I'm not going down again. I won't." His gaze drifted past me, toward the window where the desert night pressed close. "You already are." I turned, heart hammering. In the reflection on the glass, I saw them, thin gray figures, smiling mouths wide. Standing behind me, when I spun, the room was empty, only my father wheezing softly. But the dust on the floor told the truth. Footprints trailed from the door to my chair. I don't know how much longer I can hold out. The whispers seep into everything, every silence filled with their voices. The footprints appear each night, closer, clearer. I used to think the rule, stay out, was about safety, about preventing accidents. Now I know it was a warning far older, and I fear I've already broken it beyond repair. I thought the mine was behind me. I thought that if I stayed in the house, locked every door, ignored the wind, I could outlast it. I was wrong. The whispers grew sharper each night, less like background noise, more like direct voices pressed to my ear. I no longer heard them outside. I heard them in my blood threading through each pulse. They no longer coaxed, they commanded. "Come down." My father knew. His eyes dimmed more each day, his body shrinking into the recliner. But when I caught him awake, he would rasp the same words. "Don't listen. Don't listen," as if he could shield me by repeating it. It wasn't enough. The seventh night after my last descent, I woke standing at the front door, hand on the knob, dust under my bare feet. I hadn't remembered leaving bed. The desert wind pressed against the siding, whispering my name. I slammed the lock and stumbled back, hard a hammer. By morning, I knew it would only get worse. I sat across from my father, voice breaking. They won't stop. His eyes, foggy and weak, fixed on mine. They never do. What if I go down again? What if I face them, finish it somehow? His breath rattled. You can't finish hunger. You can only feed it or starve it. I gripped his hand. Then I'll starve it. But even as I said it, I knew starvation wasn't an option. Hunger waits. Hunger grows. That night, the dust footprints reached my bed again. I woke to find them pressed into the sheets beside me, indentations as though someone had lain there. My skin crawled. My resolve broke. I would go back, not to fight, not to burn, but to end it, one way or another. The storm had passed by morning. The desert lay under a low, gray sky, clouds heavy, air cold. I packed rope, lantern, revolver, and a single can of fuel. Enough for a last strike or a last light. When I left, my father's eyes followed me. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The trail up Cutter's Pass felt shorter than ever, as though the mountain drew me in. My legs hardly strained, my breath never faltered. The shaft waited. Boards leaning, wire dangling, like a mouth already open. Inside, the air pressed damp and metallic. My chalk marks still lined the walls, though some looked smeared, as if fingers had dragged across them. The first chamber held only silence. The second reeked of damp stone. The fissure swallowed me without pause. In the third chamber, the hole glowed faint blue, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. The markings around the rim had multiplied again, gouged deeper, spirals and words overlapping. I tied the rope. My hands didn't shake. Down I went. The cavern welcomed me with a roar of whispers. Figures stirred at the edges, dozens now, their mouths stretching wider, smiles splitting skin. Bones shifted underfoot like sand. At the far end, the tall figure waited. Shoulders bent, head cocked, grin endless. My grandfather's voice rolled out of it, low and resonant. "Welcome home." I lifted the lantern. The flame barely held against the cold. "Why me?" The chorus answered at once, 1,000 voices layered. "Because you listened." I staggered forward, bones crunching. "What are you?" The voices swelled. "We are silence. We are what the earth keeps. We are the weight beneath your feet. We are what waits when light dies." The tall figure stepped closer, dust trailing from its limbs. "You can't leave. You're already part of us." The whispers slid into my skull, images hammering. My grandfather's descent, my father staring hollow at the mountains, myself lying in the dust beside the pit. I saw my own body, gray and smiling, rising to join them. For one breath, I wanted it. The silence promised an end to hunger, an end to pain. No more struggle, no more fear. Only quiet, endless and deep. But then I saw my father again, frail and whispering, clinging to life in a broken chair, still resisting. "Don't listen." The flame in the lantern wavered. I pulled the revolver free. The tall figure spread its arms. "You can't kill silence." "Maybe not," I said, voice cracking. "But I can kill myself before you take me." For the first time, the smile faltered. The whispers surged. "No, no, no." I raised the revolver to my head. My finger tightened. The cavern shook. The whispers screamed. The tall figure lunged. I fired. The shot split, the roar deafening. Pain blossomed across my temple, fire flooding my skull. For a moment, the world fractured. Blue light, white fire, black silence. And then, I woke in the dirt outside the shaft. The sun glared overhead, harsh and hot. My head throbbed, blood sticky at my temple, but I was alive. The revolver lay empty beside me, the rope frayed and cut. The shaft behind me was silent, no glow rose, no whispers pressed. Only wind through sagebrush dry and thin. I stumbled down Cutter's Pass, vision blurred, ears ringing. My legs carried me without thought. When I reached the house, my father still sat in his recliner, eyes half shut. He opened them as I staggered in. For a moment, he looked surprised. Then his mouth curved in something almost like relief. "You came back," he whispered. "I'm here," I rasped. He nodded once, eyes closing again. "Then maybe it isn't forever." I collapsed beside him, revolver slipping from my hand. That was 3 weeks ago. The whispers have not returned. The footprints have faded. At night, the wind rattles only like wind. The house is quiet, the desert ordinary. But sometimes, in the stillest hours, I catch the faintest sound beneath it all. A murmur, a sigh, rising from the earth. I don't listen. I don't answer. And yet, when I close my eyes, I see the cavern. I see the tall figure, arms open, smile endless. I hear my grandfather's voice, low and patient. We wait. The rule was simple: stay out. I broke it. And though I walked back into daylight, I don't know if I ever truly left.